Okay. Well, good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us. Male childlessness, unpacking the elephant in the suitcase. I'm Anne from Melbourne, a lived experience counselor and psychotherapist with a keen interest in supporting men and women who are childless not by choice.
And I'm Robin Hadley, and I'm, I guess, a mediated childless man, certainly circumstantially childless man. I'm in Manchester in the UK. I'm 63, just to get an age context in there.
Well, if we're doing the age context, I've just turned 60. So we're kind of in the same ballpark.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you so much for joining us. And yeah, we might get started. So, Rob, we met a few years ago when I was doing some research and could not find data around the male viewpoint. I contacted you thinking I was missing something critical in my searches. And your response was that there is a lack of data around male childlessness. Why do you think there's so much silence both in the research and the social world?
That's a really good question. And it's a big question. And the subject we're dealing with is complex. And one thing about societies, I think a lot these days, is to just have a simple solution. And I'm sure everyone here has faced simple solutions to their complex personal problems, issues around childlessness. Why is there lack of data? On a sort of society-wide level, most societies started off in a warlike setting at some point, and the majority of people involved in a war at the front line as such are men. And so there's a theory that you don't want your men to be seen as any way vulnerable because you give a psychological advantage to any enemy. Also, you want your men to be virile and seen as virile. So what happens in many societies and cultures is that men are seen as fully fertile from puberty until death. And so the biological clock tends not to be applied, even though there is a biological clock. And also there's a social clock in society. It's a time when it's appropriate to be a parent. Too young, and that's too bad. Too old. That's changing a bit now because of IVF. But even so, there tends to be an age limit around that. And usually it's between 20 and 40 is the social clock element. So those sort of societal pressures are embedded in us from youngsters. We're socialized that way, but they're also in policy around our lives and that frame society and frame the way we are. So why there's not a lot about men? Because they don't want to be really saying your men are vulnerable. Also, you can put it down to actually we want women to be nurturing, and so all the nurturing care thing goes towards women, whether they like it or not, leaving therefore the other elements, the provider protector element, to men. So they sort of reinforce each other into categories like that. If you believe men are in charge, and they tend to occupy all the high positions, men don't really like men who aren't like them that much, particularly the higher they go, in my opinion. And so I think, again, relating to that being vulnerable, men quite often judge men harshly. And that again becomes embedded in society and how the men are treated. So there's lots of reasons around why there's not a lot about men. And some of that is around about how society views women and what society wants to do to protect women. But also one of the drivers of society is to reproduce, to keep going. That's a evolutionary thing, biological, but it's also a social thing as well, and social economic thing. So yeah, I hope that sort of helps. So there's much more drive to be around women and not around men, because we can just say men are fertile, that's fine. And if they're not, we don't really care.
So a lot of social factors around that, isn't it? I mean,
Yeah.
we've all heard about the biological clock,
Mm,
but the social clock, that is something I haven't heard about or haven't seen written anywhere.
mm,
Can you explain a little bit more about what that actually means? I know you mentioned a little bit about age limits,
mm.
but can you just go into a little bit more context around that?
Sure. Actually, an Australian woman called Leslie Cannold wrote, well, her thesis in a book called What No Baby. And she mentioned the social clock. She interviewed a lot of women across, I think, the UK, United States, and Australia, and found out that the social clock was very important. In fact, as important as the biological clock. So on the arc of life, we expect to be doing certain things at certain times and are expected to be doing certain things at certain times. And the pressures around reproducing really increased around the 30 mark. This was the time you're supposed to be fulfilling your social cultural norms around reproduction. And the social clock are the pressures, the expectation, the societal one, but also the personal one and the peer group. Your peer group is moving along a track and certain things are supposed to be happening. And if they're not happening to you, so like in my mid 30s, I was really, really broody, and my colleagues were becoming fathers because it was a male organization I was in. But also the women were becoming mothers, and I wasn't. So I really noticed that, and actually, what was wrong with me that I couldn't find a partner, and the partners I had didn't want to have babies with me, basically. Although one did, and then didn't. So that's the social clock, and why it's related to the biological clock. Quite often, these evolutionary aspects get embedded into society, and so it is related to the biological. We all, I think, would understand the biological clock when it comes to women, but the biological clock also applies to men. More and more evidence now that sperm starts to decline in efficacy as you get older. And if you want to be a sperm donor, basically not many places will take your sperm if you're age 35. If you're a sperm donor, if you're going through treatment, they'll work with you. But for sperm donation, and that's not widely published, but it's an absolute marker of
Yep.
a male biological clock.
Yeah.
Also, for men and women, we're sort of irradiated all the time. The older we get, the more exposed we are, and the older we get, our cells don't repair like they used to when we're young. So there's the sort of biological decline anyway. So yeah, the biological gets embedded in the social, and the social becomes embedded in the personal and the psychological. So we are biopsychosocial beings, and they all intertwine. And so men tend to have riskier jobs, tend to get exposed to more riskier elements. So now we sort of know around DNA how the environment can get embedded into sperm, into your body, into your genetics. So men are quite vulnerable from that environmental aspect as well. So the biosocial clock, once you sort of think, oh yeah, this is it. You know, when I was in my 30s, a prime example would be, when am I going to hear the patter of tiny feet from a parent? And now, because people are living longer, grandparenthood. When am I going to become a grandparent?
Yeah.
So that's your biosocial clock. And people will say the clock's ticking, and particularly to women. But
Yep.
and they separate men out and say, well, you can have children any time of your life.
Yep.
Unless you're very rich, it doesn't really apply. For sort of ordinary men, if they start becoming fathers at 55, 60, it's a different different game than if you're very rich.
Yeah. That is so interesting. I had no idea about the 35 mark for men, because we hear a lot about, women, you got to get going, you got to, as you say, the clock's ticking. But we don't hear about that about men. And I love what you say about biopsychosocial beings, and especially on the social bit. So we find, women will get onto a Facebook chat group, they'll talk, they'll get involved in blogs, they'll go down the pub and have a cry over their glass of wine with their friends. But men don't have those conversations, do they? Like, we don't hear men's viewpoints on social media. We don't see, apart from your book, we don't see many books written. I don't think there's many blogs written by men around their experience. So although we're social beings and there's a lot of social conditioning, there's still so much silence. Like, it's a real elephant in the suitcase. Like, nobody wants to talk about it. Everyone hides it away. And there's just this amazing silence around what's going on.
I agree. And the reasons for the silence revolve around what we expect of men and how we deal with that. So a man to be vulnerable in a group, apart from therapy groups, something like that, is very, very rare. And what do men do when they go out? They go to places where they have a shared experience generally. So if they like football, the bar or golf or whatever, they go there and they talk about those things. And I find this really fascinating. Sperm's like the only cell that can survive for any length of time out of the body. And men sort of survive out of their body. How are we validated? Men and women are validated through virility. If you look at society, women's virility is internal. So around about motherhood, all that sort of thing. I know it's changing now these days with women's careers and stuff like that, but underlying, it's still around motherhood and reproduction and nurturing, that sort of thing. For men, it's outside. What do you do for a living? So there's that validity and verification by virility and how your virility is measured in society. And for both men and women, one of the highest status is to become a parent. There's many papers around, academic papers, but one was from South Africa saying you are not a man if you're not a father. And although in some cultures it may be very overt around that, it's out there, very, very structured about becoming fathers. In other cultures, and I would say this to the Western sort of cultures, it's below the radar. It's still there, but it's just not right out there. Marcia Inhorn, professor at MIT or Harvard, something like that, has done a lot of work in the Middle East, the Arabian countries around there, around infertility and men in particular. And what she says about those countries, and there's a rich mixture of religions there, but I guess the biggest one would be Islam, is how much the men celebrate being a father and how much involved they are in the family, which is something that's not really reproduced, particularly in Western media. Yes, I've gone off on the track there. So pull me back in, Anne.
It's very, very interesting because, this whole thing about social conditioning and, you're talking about being validated as parents. Yes, things have changed with women and, we're told we can have it all. We can have the career, we can have the travel, we can have all the whatever we want, and then we can have the babies. But the reality is there is a biological clock. And with men, the whole thing about the social clock, the biological clock to a certain extent. And yet there's this massive silence around this. So like if female childlessness is the elephant in the room, the male childlessness is the elephant in the suitcase, which is kind of where we started our conversation. And I think one of the things that I was really interested in from one of your papers actually is the biggest elephant brought about by this silence and this not wanting to talk is that childless men are more strongly affected by relationship conflict than childless women. I have lots of theories about this, but again, someone's just posted about male infertility is not a subject that's talked about very often. And from my experience and working with people, that sort of stuff causes a lot of conflict within relationships. You know, one person wants to talk, the other one doesn't. So I have lots of theories, but how about we do a role play that might illustrate some of this conflict, and we invite our listeners to post their comments and questions for discussion. Does that sound okay?
Sounds good to me.
All right. So the scenario is one where the female will be voicing her thoughts out loud, and Rob, you'll be voicing the internal dialogue of what is going on from the male point of view. So let's start. Okay, this is me in role play. Oh, blast. Another invitation to a baby shower. What is this? The 5th this year? I hate these events. The pregnant women everywhere. The looks of pity. Oh, God. Aunt Maud will be there with her endless. So when are you going to give your high-tooting, globe-trotting career a break and make some babies instead? And Jenny with her, have you tried all her gazillion remedies? Did you know her latest one was drinking hibiscus tea naked, bathed by the light of the full moon? I mean, seriously? How ridiculous is that? Oh, and Jeff. Oh, yes, Jeff. Have you seen Pastor Vernon to pray over you and bind the demon of infertility? Oh, drives me nuts. And let's not forget Alan and Ella with their twins and triplets on the way. The ultimate IVF success story. I wish I could just go hide on a desert island somewhere. Hey, are you even listening to me? Have you heard anything I've said? How come these things don't bother you after everything we've been through and still go through? You're not going to go all bloody silent on me again, are you?
All bloody silent on you? What can I say? I don't know what to say. I don't have the words. Inside, I'm all churned up. But how does that help anything by me saying what I feel? If I don't even know what I feel apart from it all inside, I can't do anything. I can't fix this. I'm trying my best to be like a lifeboat in a raging storm and just hold everything together for her. If I come part of the storm as well, I just flood everything and I just might drown her. And that's not going to do anything to help anyone. I can't say this. If this comes out, I'd just be completely empty. It's like a volcano. I've got to keep the cap on the volcano. What I'd really like to do is just run to the shed and give myself time to process, or just go and talk about the game with the lads. Anything apart from being here when I don't know what to do, and I should do. I should have a solution for this, because I just don't know what I'm gonna do here. I don't know. I just wish it wasn't like this. But I can't say anything to anyone. The other time, at work, that fella said, "Do you have kids?" And I said, "No." He said, "Well, some people don't deserve them." I could have punched him. Oh, when Jack said, "Oh, I'll come round and sort your wife out," then you jaffer. I mean, how can it be like that? And how can I do anything to make this right? And that's what I should be doing. I should be able to fix this, and I can't. I thought the IVF and the science would work. I thought it was guaranteed. And it's, well, no, it's this. And we went to the counselling, but that was for her, so they could help do something. And it's not for me. What do I feel? I don't know what I feel. It's just inside. That's it.
That was so insightful. Like I've made some notes here. When you're saying you don't know what to say, you don't have the words. And I think from my perspective, a lot of women wouldn't even think that way. I wouldn't, because it would be, well, I've got the words. You talk about other stuff. Why can't you talk about this? And of course, the more silent you get, even in that role play, I could feel myself going, why aren't you saying something? Say something. And I guess that's how the arguments start, don't they? Because the silence in itself is annoying.
Absolutely. And the man's in a position where he's absolutely got very little to use. And where does this come from? This, men don't feel, men don't talk. They go and do things. They're validated through actions, solutions, oriented to goals, and that comes from very, very early in society. So if you look on Facebook now and just look when somebody posts something about their baby or toddler, when they use the term "my little man," "my little soldier," sometimes it's like 8 months old, and that's embedding then what a soldier, what a man is already. And they're setting that pathway up. You don't get the same thing about an equivalent age girl of "my little woman," "my little princess." And I know women would say, "And I'm still his princess now, and I'm running a multinational firm." But, that's embedded. And so it's like men get placed a concrete block here. And so when I was saying underneath, that's it. Whereas women tend to, and it's broad brushstrokes here, tend to have verbal skills put into them because they're going to be nurturing when they become adults. So that's all sort of fed in. So their expressiveness is allowed and permitted and celebrated. Oh, she's upset. Oh, isn't she good? Da, 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 da. Stop crying to the lads. Man up.
Yeah,
it's a terrible thing to say, man up. Which really means be like a machine, be a Terminator in effect. Just go out there and do until you're worn out, and the next one will come along. So that's embedded, and so that becomes a block there, and that includes the head. So the thought process might be there, and that people and men may go very rational, and that's like being outside themselves, like going out to resolve things, but also the physical things of actually, I want to go out, I want to run away. And I certainly can't fight you. The fight flight response. Well, I can't fight you and I can't run away. So I'm stuck.
Yeah.
All this stuff going on down here. How do I channel it?
Yeah. And, like you say, was it, you're like in a lifeboat and you feel like you're drowning. so I guess like with the conditioning, yes, we tell little boys, don't cry, don't cry. But when a little girl is crying, it's like, oh, come to mummy, mummy will kiss it better. Um, so we're conditioning the children
Mm,
from a long time. And I think, in our generation, it was very much gender based, men
mm,
did this and women did that. So when it comes to things like this, it's almost as if there's this big black box of communication, isn't there, between
mm,
the two partners. And we're both looking at things through the filter of whatever is in that black box, which is our social conditioning, our
mm.
experiences, our past arguments.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, but the last time you said that, you meant da
Mm,
da da. Like I think you said something about going and running to the shed. Well, in Australia, we always say all boys need a shed, their man cave.
mm.
And it's like, well, you're going to the shed to get away from me, not because you're going into the shed because you actually need a break. You actually don't know how to deal with this. I'm having a tirade about something, and what's going through your mind from what I'm hearing is, I can't fix this.
Yeah.
And so
And
it's like, yeah,
yeah, the conditioning is to go and fix things,
yeah.
to be a provider of a safe space, to be a provider of the lifeboat. And there was something there that went through my mind, which I've now forgotten, which is fantastic, isn't it?
It'll come
Uh,
back.
it will come back. Yeah, I think on the therapy front, when men, you say men don't talk. Men, when they're in a safe situation and they feel that it's okay to be vulnerable, they will talk and they will not stop talking. I did an interview for a research project, and the fellas talked for 4 hours, and said, I've never spoken to anybody else about this, because he felt safe, that he wasn't going to be mocked, he wasn't going to be made vulnerable, and there's a skill in that, and there's also, quite often in medical and health projects, they say, just talk. That's lovely, but it's the listening that counts. It's learning to listen. There's a whole skill in learning to listen non-judgmentally and to make that space safe. So the woman who wrote *Handmaid's Tale*, Margaret Atwood, I've remembered
Yeah.
her name first time. In a previous book, she wrote that women are scared of being murdered, men are scared of humiliation, the top fears. I don't know, I think almost everybody's scared of being murdered, really. But on humiliation, she's bang on. Why do men put such a front up? Because they don't want to be vulnerable. Because from early age, to be vulnerable, to be soft, as we would say in Manchester, is not a good thing for a man. And whereas that expressiveness has come through for the women, it's a difficult pathway for men to follow, and they've got to do it tentatively. So men going off to the shed is really so they can find their way around the concrete block, try and find the words that they can say that aren't going to make them go into the flight mode and go back to the argument thing, in my opinion.
No, that sounds very much like what, experiences are. I love what you say about a safe space. That's one of our basic instincts and one of our basic needs, isn't it? The need to feel safe, physically safe, emotionally safe. And I suppose going into the shed is a safe space. That's my space. No one's in here. No one's bothering me. So I'm just wondering if you can share some insight. If we're talking about this black box of communication, because we're talking about conflict, men in conflict. How do we help each other create safety in that black box of communication? So that we can communicate without being afraid that we're going to upset the other person.
Yeah. And I think the thing to do is actually unpack the black box, because inside the black box, there's a load of mechanics and stuff to record and to learn from. So maybe renaming the black box and putting frameworks and mechanics in to learn from. So one of the things about talking to your partner is actually putting limits on. Okay, you said your thing. I'm going to repeat back what I heard, but only what I heard, not what you said last week, not what you did in the shops, not what your mother said about me, anything like that. Keep it in the here and now. And we're going to do this for 10 minutes. We're going to put a limit on it. So I'm going to say what you were saying about the pasta and all that thing. It's really upsetting for you to be reminded of what you're not. And that brings in things about anxiety and not being worthy for you. That's what I heard, how upset you were. For me, that makes me feel anxious. I really want to resolve that, but I don't know how. So maybe we can work on something that works for us both. And that might be, we're going to go to this event, but we're only going to stay for 20 minutes and then we're out. We've got to do something. We can't avoid it, but we can manage what we're doing there.
That is really good, isn't it? Like putting, I suppose it's like containing what we're doing, but it's also containing the conversation. So it doesn't kind of spiral into, you know, a massive tirade about all sorts of stuff. And I love what you say about unpacking the black box. So one of the things I was thinking of, and love to get, you know, your insight on this. Earlier on, when we were doing the role play, you were saying, I don't know what to say. I don't have the words. So what are your thoughts around maybe creating some non-verbal communications in that black box? I'll give you an example. Years ago, when we were on IVF, and I was a monster, I'll admit that. We used to have, I had this little toy car, and so I had it in the line of sight of the front door, and the car was a mood indicator. So if the car was there and it was balanced and it was fine, it was answered an okay mood, it's safe to come in and do things. If the car was on its side, or tread with caution. If the car was upside down, do not talk. So, you know, for us, that kind of verbal communication, because I knew if my husband had come in and said, how are you? I would have probably bitten his head off if, you know, it was one of those days and I just had a phone call that we had another failed cycle or whatever. What are your thoughts around, you know, you talked about containing the conversation for 10 minutes. Would something like that, like having some non-verbal skills and patterns that they can develop together, what are your thoughts on that?
What works, do what works. If that works for you, then fine. And it's about negotiating that. And for my point of view, it would be remembering that's what the thing was, and not just something put in the way for me to trip over as I came through the door. But that's me. And that's it. I think also men tend to go out to work and they tend to do lots of problem solving and lots of communication around work. So sometimes if you can frame it as, you know, if this was at work and I was having a difficulty communicating this, that, and the other, well, we've got a format for resolving that. Can I adapt that to my home life? So sometimes you have solutions away from your intimate relationship that can be brought into it. So you do have skills. You do know how to communicate. Just a matter of transferring and adapting to your personal situation. And sometimes the things you learn going through IVF and stuff like that, and the communication skills you get and the knowledge you pick up can go the other way as well. That actually you might start listening more at work and dropping down the judgments.
Yeah. I love what you said about listening, and that is such an important skill as well. You know, it's one of those things where I always think, you're listening, but have you heard anything I've said?
Mm.
You know, and again, understanding a little bit about what's actually going on inside, and
Mm.
understanding a little bit about that. I can't fix this for you. And it's, you know, being able to say, I don't need you to fix this. I just need you to listen.
And absolutely, that's brilliant, because listening is fixing. You know, just listening and reflecting back. Just it seems simple, but it's so important that actually the other person's been hurt. They're really upset, and you can say, you know, I get you're really upset. I can see that. I can feel it, and it makes me feel anxious. I really want to do something around it, but I can't. But I've heard how it is for you inside.
Mm,
And actually, me just sat here engaging just on the, you said this and the feelings this for you, sort of embeds that in the man as well, gives him a vocabulary then to talk. And so in a way you can grow together from a place that was maybe conflict and miscommunication and out of sync, to being in sync and
mm,
communication.
yeah. And yeah, I think also, you know, just from listening to you in the conversations we've had, understanding that men who are battling childlessness also have the same sorts of feelings. You know, I think in one of your papers you talk about significant sense of loss. You mentioned earlier men get broody. I never knew that until I actually read one of your papers. And men report higher levels of anger, depression, jealousy, and isolation than women. Never knew that either.
Yeah.
You know, so again, I think for me, from a female point of view, having that insight and being able to understand that probably will help a little bit more to go, okay, you've got these feelings, but you don't have the words. It's not that you don't feel, or it's not that you're not interested, or, you know, you're not bothered about what's happening. Um, it would be so lovely if we could have more men actually being brave or being comfortable enough to talk about this. Um, it would be so nice to see, you know, the ability to create some of these safe spaces for um, guys as well. I think Robin's frozen. Yes, he has.
Hopefully he'll come back in a few minutes.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's obviously lost his connection, so
Ah.
you can just carry on with some of the parts of your discussion. And oh, there we go.
It's back on. Yep. You're back, Rob? No, he's still
Okay.
frozen. You're back.
I'm back. You're back. We're all back.
Yeah. Yeah. I was just talking about it would be great to be able to create those safe spaces.
Yeah.
For men to be able to feel safe, to be able to talk about what's going on for them. And like you said, you know, in your research, they were quite happy to talk.
Yeah.
And you know, we've talked a little bit about, you know, in a relationship, being able to understand each other's point of view, creating little bits of safe spaces. It's a lot of effort that we really need to put in it, when we're kind of working on childlessness, because it's so emotional. It's such a lonely place. And I had a question while we were talking, is thinking, women will look for their social support, you know, like we have Stephanie's created this beautiful place that a lot of women are on. We'll have our friends, we've got our support groups, we have some of us might have, you know, close family members. And from my experience, again, a lot of women will look for that, whereas men tend to internalize, because, you know, what we've talked about, you know, they don't want to be seen as vulnerable. do men look for support, or is it just something that's completely don't even want to think about it because I don't want to be vulnerable?
Well, a bit of both. There comes a point when they do look for support, but I think there's a difference. A bit like, very much like a stereotype. Men, when they go shopping, go for specific things. They don't go for a wander round and a graze and all that sort of thing. Apart from maybe a pub crawl, that would be the difference. So they look for specific things. So there was some research into bulletin boards on health issues, and what they found was the women tended to stick around and have grew and had social connectivity there, even after treatment or the advice they'd got or whatever. For the men, A, they like to be anonymous, and B, they went in, said what they wanted to say, got the information if they could, and then went out again. So there's a different style, I think, that just reflects society and how society's set up. For childless men, there's the childless men's community on Facebook, which is for circumstantial childless men. Tends to be a bit older, but men who think they're not going to reproduce, that sort of thing. There's a few specifically for men going through IVF or partners going through treatment. And so that's very much there. But apart from that, not that many. And again, it's just a reflection of society around that. And certainly, when you said men don't, in my mid-30s, when I was sat in a bar thinking, I'd like to chat to that woman. The fear of failure was strong. The fear of failure was strong in this one, and the fear of humiliation. So quite often I wouldn't do it. But also I couldn't say that to anyone.
Yeah.
I just couldn't, because of that block that I'd been put in, and which I supported to a degree as well. It's only once I started training as a counsellor that I sort of got the confidence to be vulnerable and to be exposed, to say, I was really broody in my 30s, and there was a biological urge in the vernacular. My sacks got heavy regularly, but the biological urge isn't really associated with men. It is with women. But we are biological beings. If there was a species of where there's a male and a female, and either one of them didn't want to reproduce or didn't have a biological urge, they wouldn't survive. And we have survived. But it's almost like dehumanizing and debiologizing men and pushing it all onto women. It's not fair to either.
Yeah. I'm just looking at the time there. There's so much in this topic. I think when we were talking about this earlier, you said, this is like there's a herd of elephants, or was it like the Russian dolls, the elephant within an elephant?
Yeah.
So we've touched on, a tiny little part of it around communication and trying to create safe spaces. But I'm just wondering, did you have anything else, or should we maybe go into the questions? There's a few questions there.
Well, I'd just like to thank everybody for engaging on this and for turning up. And I hope you really got something from it. And you've been brilliant, Anne, in your handling of this. I'm sorry the interweb dropped out.
That's all right.
That's technology. We're worldwide. But do you want to say anything? Oh, can I just say one thing? Yeah. Men are people too.
That is true. I'm just looking at the questions here. There's a few in the Q&A.
Okay.
Yeah. Are there any ones there that you?
Well, the top one, it's hard for my wife and I in our early 30s. We tried for a baby, etc. I found I was negative after tests, and operation found I was barren. This is deeply shocking, as men are expected to produce millions of sperm. And yes, it is deeply shocking. And a lot of people don't, unless something happens in your formative years where you're investigated, the assumption is you're going to be fertile in society. When you're on that arc of life and you're looking at the ideal track of where you should be and where you are, and this I think typically happens in the mid-30s, like when I was really broody and everybody else seemed to be on track and I wasn't, then this revelation is deeply, deeply shocking. And there's nothing there to prepare you for it. So you have to try and find some services and find some help and sort of build your own track.
Yep. And I think, again, it comes back to that safe spaces, finding the safe spaces where you can feel supported. Another comment there is, I found my own family unsupportive. And yeah, sometimes families don't know how to deal with it because, it's a reflection on everyone, like in some cultures, it's like, oh, my child can't have a child. I can't be a grandparent. It's a failure on my part. Like, it's got nothing to do that your child can't have a child. But for some reason it becomes, and then there's that whole thing of people don't know how to react. So again, I think I would really like to encourage the people who are here, have a think about your safe spaces, have a think about who and how you can create that, who and how you can find those people around.
Yeah, and I think in the UK there's an organisation called BICA, British Infertility Counselling Association, and I'm sure there's places around the world similar to that. And although, I'm not, as far as aware, I'm not infertile because I met somebody, married them, we got divorced, and then there was economic problems for 2 or 3 years, so I didn't see anybody in my early 30s. Then met someone, we were going on farm, but then we split up, and then I met my wife, and she's older than me, and although she did want to have children, because she was older, she didn't want to take the risk. So there's all sorts of circumstances around that. I would look for somebody to talk to who specializes in disenfranchised grief, which is a bereavement, and it's a living bereavement that we have. It's a loss, and it's a tangible loss because it's a loss of an arc that we could have been in, and we're on a different arc. And the difference between the two arcs is where we can get trapped sometimes in that space between. And to get some counselling to discuss what your thoughts are, what your feelings are, and maybe put some sort of framework in that gap. Paul Simon does a great song. He does lots of great songs, but one says, I can't run, but I can walk much faster than this. And there's something, I may not be able to do that, but I can do this around that. And the person in the Q&A, families sometimes are supportive, sometimes are not. And also they change over time. And we like to think of families as fixed, firm, they're there and they're always constant. But there's so much inconstancy in this very variable and complex world. It can be really, really difficult. And I really, really feel for you. And I really appreciate that you've put your story forward. But yes, counselling. And, if one counsellor doesn't work, there's always another one.
That is so important. That fit and being able to trust and build rapport with the person you're trying to get help from is so important. I always say to people, keep looking till you find the person that you can work with. Just because you've met one counselor and it doesn't work doesn't mean you're stuck with them. And again, it's about that safe space. There's a question there, Rob, that might be for you. What advice would you give to single men struggling?
I'd still go to counselling. I really would, and it is a struggle if you're single. It can be, because who do you share with? But maybe in the UK, and I think there's a thing called Andy's Man Club, which is local clubs around the place. You go for a coffee and a chat, and it's just a place for men to talk. And certainly there's more and more of these sort of organizations popping up locally where it's just to go and meet other fellas and have a bit of a chat. What you reveal and what you don't reveal is up to you. They are people, the name I can't remember, who's sort of in charge, so it doesn't get too near. So there are places to go, groups to go to, do things you like, men's sheds, whatever, and just have a look round, scout around locally, because quite often once you start looking, you find a group, and that might be a running group or a cycling group or a bowls or a darts, whatever, but something to give you another network, to build your network. So, you know, that volcano, keeping it pressed down, don't want to explode. One way to release the volcano is to have ways of relieving the pressure going sideways, sort of laterally. And that would be your social network to channel out stuff. So you can just stop the pressure from building.
I think you've answered part of the next one, but I'll read it out anyway, because the last one there's interesting. It's how can we expect more men to talk when there's always a focus and constant reminder that men don't talk? You've answered that, I think, with what we've been saying. Inviting more men into a space to share. Again, you know, looking for that network, looking for that. The last bit of that question is an interesting one. Do we need to rethink how we use language in this circumstance and make it more positive?
Absolutely. Language is key. Part of the thing, I think I said in the thing, I have no words. And one of the things about counseling is giving people words, building a frame, a vocabulary. Okay. And that vocabulary can make it easier for you to describe what you've gone through or going through, but also to make it safe for people you're talking to. And really it's about, we are all extraordinary, and we all have extraordinary lives, but everybody's like that. So we're all unique, and it's normalizing our uniqueness. That's key, I think. And so vocabulary is around that, and education to a certain degree around that. And that's what a bit of what counseling is around. It's your viewpoint is this. With counseling, it goes a bit like that. If you're into photography, lenses, the prime lens used to suffer terribly from flare. Everything went through them, and then they put coatings on. This is Yashi Pantex delivered the coatings, so lenses became better. And what you're doing with counseling is putting coatings on your lens so the distortions are reduced. And we all distort. We all distort because we're a lens for the environment that's around us, including from when we're little babies, and we absorb what we're supposed to be and do.
Yeah. You know, I love what you said. We're all extraordinary. We're all unique. And language is so powerful, and the lenses, and it all starts with us internally, doesn't it? For people to be comfortable and feel safe and brave to start talking, and then one person talks, and then another person talks, and then before you know it, society and the language around you know, childlessness and that feeling of being comfortable will change. But yeah, we need to start with us. That's kind of how I've always thought about this area.
I think there may be a difference here between men and women. I think when women talk, and you say your experience, the woman listening will go, "Oh yeah, I get that," sort of thing. Particularly if it's deep and personal. And then as the conversation develops, you find out it's completely different. But the initial thing is acceptance. For men, when I've been talking and counseling men, and I don't do counseling anymore, it's, you know, I'm not like that. So what are you like? And sometimes that actually I'm like this is the first time the men have heard themselves. And then when you hear yourself, if you listen so hard, people hear themselves. And then they say, actually, that's a belief I've got, but it's not quite true. I'm actually a bit like this. I'm a bit like that. And they sort of see themselves and do that broadening of the viewpoint, and maybe not hold themselves up to so much harsh judgment.
Yep. I love that.
The self-judge is the most critical judge.
Yep. Be kind to ourselves and be very gentle when we're trying to pull our elephants out of our suitcases. Yeah. I've just noticed the time. It's 2 minutes to 9. We could talk about this for months, I think.
Certainly I could.
Yeah. But I hope we have taken the lid off this suitcase. We've given our listeners a little bit of an insight into male childlessness, and maybe some thoughts around starting the conversation and looking at what's going on with you, and yeah, we'll take it from there.
Yeah, thank you for attending, and to people who join us later. I hope you enjoy and have enjoyed. Enjoyed is probably the wrong word. Hope you got something from this. I certainly have.
Yep. Thank you everyone for being here, and thank you, Rob. It's been most interesting and insightful as always.
And of course, thank you to Stephanie for kicking all this off.
Yes,
Way
absolutely.
back. So well done, Stephanie.
Yep.